Hello, everybody, and welcome to another session, another Sunday morning Bible study. Here we're going to continue our study of the book of Revelation. And so we'll do just a little bit of introduction, help us to catch up to where we were last time, and then we'll jump right in. So remember that John is on the island of Patmos. This is one of the 12, and he is receiving this message, this revelation from Jesus. He's on the island because he is preaching Christ, and he's being punished for this. He's in his 90s, and so he's there, and he receives this image. The overarching message of Revelation is comfort in the midst of persecution, and also how the Lord will return and some information about some of that persecution that's going on. But ultimately, it's a message of comfort in the midst of some really challenging times, and we're gonna see about that today. So let's jump right in, and we will share this portion. Okay, I'm going to open that right up. All right, and just to review, we started with chapters 12 and 13. Remember, we learned last week about the woman and the dragon, the woman pointing either to Mary, the mother of Jesus, or the church at large, right? The church at large. So we look at that and say, okay, well, the child coming from Mary, or the church, there and so forth, is the child that is coming, and the dragon is coming to consume it, to destroy it. All right, so we see this image here, this red dragon coming, trying to kill the woman and destroy that. It fits a lot with what we know about Jesus in his early life, that he is put in danger, and the angel comes to Joseph and says, take him down to Egypt, get out of here, because Herod is trying to destroy all the children. It also connects with us here when we talk about how the church, right? And the church here means all Christians. It's you and me, all Christians all over the world, and everywhere throughout history. Christians, this is the church, and so the devil is always trying to destroy the church, and that here is coming, of course, from this woman that is represented here. All right, so that's generally what we got, and then we went in and we talked some last week about how the Lord crushed Satan. Remember that Satan is originally an angel created by God, and he leads angels against the Lord. And finally, of course, the Lord crushes Satan and casts him out. We always want to stress when we talk about the devil that God and the devil are not equals, not by any stretch of the imagination. Remember that God is eternal, he is almighty, that the devil is a created angel. God is not created, he is eternal. So this angel, and how this happened, we don't know, but the devil is an angel that turned against God and led these angels against God, and they are now cast out. All right, so talks to us about that. We have talked a little bit last week about the woman going into the desert, so on and so forth. We talked about 1,260 days, pointing to the time when Christ will return, basically the time from his death and ascension into the time that he returns. All right. Again, stressing this issue of the fact that we're living in the end times now. All right. We're not looking for some special section, or how the end times is broken up into parts, as is often taught. We're living in the end times. They started when Christ died and rose again and ascended into heaven. And the next thing that we're waiting for is the return of Christ. All right. Another image there. Okay, so the great dragon is hurled down. We see the angel Michael here. Now remember that angels are spirits, and so we're always careful when we see images, art, renditions of this activity, because we don't want to get the sense that the angels are always in the form of a person taking on human form, that in their nature, God has created them as spirits. All right, so we want to keep that in mind. But it does give us a sense, you see God winning the victory here and crushing Satan, and that there's no challenge or any sort of contest there. All right. Um, let's continue then. All right, some information here. Um, this battle, all right, this battle here that we're talking about is not Satan's original exile from heaven. Rather, here he attempts to displace the Christ child. So again, this issue of the devil coming and trying to crush Jesus, because Jesus will die on the cross and he will wash away our sins. So the devil wants to get that and take that away. All right. Okay. Let's see and make sure that we're not missing anything. All right. This then is back in Revelation, and we'll jump into some new material here. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers, who accuses them before God day and night, has been hurled down. They overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short." All right, I'm going to try to move myself out of there. All right, there we go. Okay. So again, this message of coming and saying, look, folks, you who are struggling so much because of persecution in this world for your faith, take heart that God has destroyed the devil. He has destroyed his attacks and his work against the church. How? Look at verse 11. By the blood of the Lamb. All right. And these people, these Christians, did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Now, what does that really look like? Maybe not here in the United States yet, but certainly in other parts of the world, Christians are often forced to decide, are often forced to decide, do you want to die, or do you want to recant your faith? And so that ties in right there with verse 11. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and they did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. So again, this idea of trusting in him. All right, connecting there at the bottom of verse 12, it says, he is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. All right, so the devil, why is he filled with fury? Remember, the devil is judged. All right, he is judged. In other words, he knows he's going to spend eternity in hell. And what does he want to do? He wants to have as many people there with him as he possibly can. So he is working all the time. And so when it says he knows that his time is short, that is a great message to us, because our time is short too. All right. So if I am a Christian, the fact that my time is short is a great comfort. It means that it won't be long in the grand scheme of things before Christ returns. And we'll be done with all this suffering and difficulty in life because of sin. But for those who don't know Christ, right, the fact that time is short is not good news. That is a challenging thing, because we know that the only reason a person will ever go to hell, the only reason a person goes to hell, is if they die without Jesus Christ, right? And the time is short. All right. So, okay, let's continue. Some verses here to help us. Job 1:11. But put forth your hand and touch all that he has. He will surely curse you to your face. Job 2. However, put forth your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh. He will curse you to your face. All right. So what's going on here? Remember, in the Bible, there are instances where we see the devil working. Remember that the devil has been cast down. He has been cast down to the earth. And right now, the earth is his kingdom. He is the prince of this world. Now, how does that work? How does that work? On one hand, we say, well, God is almighty. He's in control of everything. He's the Lord of all. But at the same time, the devil is the prince of this world. Well, it's understanding it's a both and. Remember, the devil is God's devil. That doesn't mean that they love each other. It doesn't mean that they work together for evil. But it does mean that, in the same way that a person owns a dog or a cat and has control over them, God has control over the devil. The devil can do nothing outside of God's power. So we recognize that the devil has power here, but only as much power as God will allow him to have. So in Job 1 and 2, we remember here's the devil coming up, and he's coming up to heaven and he says, hey, look at Job. If you make life tough on Job, he's going to curse you to your face. Zechariah 3. Then he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. Luke 22, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. All right, so those verses help us to get a sense of this here. If you look at letter B, Satan means adversary or enemy. Diablo means accuser. So when we use the word Diablo, and that is also where I believe the word devil comes from, that the Lord is, or excuse me, the devil is casting accusations at us. He's throwing them there. And Satan is a Hebrew and Aramaic word meaning adversary or enemy. All right. Okay, back to Revelation. Then the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth. When the dragon, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the desert, where she would be taken care of for a time, times and a half time, out of the serpent's reach. All right, so just summarizing this without getting too hung up in the details. This is essentially where God is protecting the church. All right, so he is protecting the church, making sure that the church may be persecuted, may have trouble, may go through difficulties in this life, in this world, but ultimately the Lord will protect her. All right, and we see that throughout history, that there have been many movements, many nations and governments that have tried to wipe out Christianity, and still the church exists today. It may be small, it may be scattered, it may be under persecution, but it still exists, and God is showing that, and he's talking about that here in Revelation. Okay, some verses to help us illustrate this issue of the church or the woman being given wings to go out into the desert. You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Deuteronomy 32. Like an eagle that stirs up its nest, that hovers over its young, he spread his wings and caught them, he carried them on his pinions. Isaiah 40, very popular passage. Yet those who wait for the Lord will gain their strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not get tired. They will walk and not be weary. So the image of wings is a powerful one. An eagle is strong. An eagle flies above all things. An eagle brings deliverance. So you can kind of get this sense of, okay, why would Jesus use the image of an eagle flying to talk about protecting the church? That's what's happening here. All right. Okay. Verse 15, back at Revelation. Then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed over its mouth. Then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to make war against the rest of her offspring, those who obey God's commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus. Okay, so some things here to help us understand this issue of a torrent, a river, water coming out of the serpent here to destroy the woman. 2 Corinthians 11. But I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will also be led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. Genesis 3. But I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on his heel. All right, there's a couple of things that we can get out of this idea of spewed water from the serpent. A couple of things. First is we can think of general persecution. In other words, that the devil's always using leaders and, excuse me, excuse me, yawning here, using governments or people in power to persecute Christianity, make it hard for the gospel to be shared. Also, one that we often forget, and that is false teaching, right? If you think about poison coming out of a serpent's mouth to try to sweep away the church, this happens all the time. We've found throughout history there are people who have come and claimed to be Jesus, and you find out that they're not. You find religions that claim to have this new sense about Jesus Christ, and or they predict that Christ will return on such and such a date, and that time comes and goes. There's false teaching in the world today about the Bible, and so we see that is a kind of torrent that comes out of the serpent's mouth. A lot of times, the most dangerous attack the devil can bring is not death or war or destruction or bombs or fire, but it is false teaching. It's lies, it's false teaching, especially when that false teaching seems close to the truth. When it seems close to the truth, that really is the greatest danger, right? So when we talk about this river, this torrent that is there to sweep away the woman, we can think of it in that way. All right, let's continue here. Okay, so another image of the angels here. If you look very closely, you can see that image there of the angels coming down and destroying the beast. All right, just another interesting image. Okay, back here, I believe this is chapter 13. And the dragon, the devil, stood on the shore of the sea, the beast out of the sea. And I saw a beast coming out of the sea, and it had 10 horns and 7 heads, and 10 crowns on his horns, and each had a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. All right, so we don't want to get too hung up on the particulars, but the general idea here is you have a beast and you have a dragon. What's the difference? The beast and the dragon. Now notice that the beast is coming out of the sea. And who's in the sea? The dragon. The dragon is the devil. So who's the beast? If the dragon is the devil, who's the beast? Well, like we've talked about up here a little bit until now, the devil likes to use people and governments, and of course governments are made up of people, but likes to use people, governments, false theology, false churches, so on and so forth, to do his damage and do his work. That is the beast. So you want to think of the beast in a couple of ways. One is political persecution and also theological persecution. In other words, the devil does two things. One is he uses governments and people, like we've talked about, to cause damage to the church. He also uses teaching, false teaching, to damage the church. All right, so I'm throwing a lot at you, but I'm trying to give some detail, but without getting caught up in the minutia. All right, so this beast, talked about it, political, theological persecution. 10 horns, 7 heads, 10 crowns, so on and so forth. Remember, we've talked about this. Number 7 and 10 are associated with power, with the Lord, with totality, completeness. Okay, that's where that's coming from. So power, so on and so forth. When you think about a leopard, a bear, and a lion, these are not tame, weak animals, right? Notice it doesn't say kitten and squirrel and badger. It says bear, lion, and leopard. All right, now notice what it says at the end of verse 2. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and his great authority. So you see where this all comes up. The beast then is given authority and power by the devil, and this beast comes with um, political or kind of earthly persecution, and then also false teaching, the theological stuff, and we're going to see that. All right, so obviously this is not a picture, a photograph, but it is a painting, and you see it's pretty accurate. If you see that there, if you see it says it has 10 horns and 7 heads. All right, so you see that, and on each head it had a blasphemous name. Okay, we don't really see that exactly, but and you see the body of the animals that are there, and so it gives us a sense of what that's like. Now you can imagine this is pretty scary here for John. All right, to see this image that would get your attention, right? It definitely would here in watching this. Okay, so a couple of things that we already touched on. Notice where the beast comes from. He's coming from the dragon, the devil. All right, at the time, this beast represented Rome. Remember that Christianity is under the oppression of Rome, and so this beast represents Rome. It also represents persecution by the church and by secular authority, like we talked about. So many times there are Christians who go the wrong way and they cause problems for other Christians and by secular authority that we talked about. All right, so we look at these. If you take a look here, you see Caesar Augustus. That should ring a bell back at the birth of Jesus. Okay, so he's Caesar at the birth of Jesus. Tiberius Caesar is Caesar at the death of Jesus. And then after he goes into heaven, you have Caligula, Claudius, Nero, and so on and so forth. When you look at John, John is in his 90s. So the emperor at this time will be Domitian. And he again is a emperor that is not sympathetic to Christianity and works to destroy it. All right, but this is definitely the secular authority causing problems. So the bottom line, what's the simple answer? The beast is the Roman Empire. All right, at this time, the beast is the Roman Empire. Okay, but how do we flesh this out throughout history? All right, well, if you think about, for example, in recent history, the Soviet Union, or communist China, or Pol Pot, or any other sort of regime, Hitler's fascist state, any other regime where you have a government trying to illegalize Christianity and to crush it, that's an example of the beast. All right, so good stuff there. All right, continuing back in Revelation, one of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Many worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshiped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can make war against them? All right, so this makes a lot of sense. All right, don't worry about the issue of the fatal wound for a second, but just watch. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. All right, and this is very concrete. Like everything that we're seeing in the book of Revelation, it's very concrete. Let me give you an example. In recent things that have happened, you look at communism. All right, it seems to be that the idea of socialism, collectivism is making a resurgence today. Right. This is the answer. What's going to solve all of our problems is collectivism. This will take care of it. And if we have this sort of a state, remember one of the tenets of socialism is the removal or the suppression of religion. All right, so again, that's this. This happened in Hitler's Germany with the movement of the Enlightenment. That we just need science, we need human reason, we don't need Christianity. With atheism, right? Again, this all brings out this issue of the whole world was astonished and followed the beast, right? In other words, people look at these different movements in history, intellectualism, the Enlightenment, secular humanism, uh, any sort of thing where people say life can be figured out without God, let alone Jesus. Life can be figured out without God, and people have gone after that stuff over and over again, and we see this happening today. All right. Okay. So we kind of touched on those questions there. Right. Revelation continuing, 5-7. The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise his authority for 42 months. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them, and was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. Daniel. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, horn possessed the eyes like a man and a mouth uttering great boasts. All right, so looking at Revelation up there, notice that the devil has given the beast a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies. And you see this all the time. Throughout history, how many leaders and kings have said, God is dead, there's no Jesus, there's no Christianity, there's no salvation, there's no such thing as sin, there's no evil, so on and so forth. And so this has been happening all throughout history. All right, this willingness to destroy God and to throw out any notion of who He is, right? So definitely, coming out there and creating that problem, all right, for them. So you probably noticed up there to exercise authority for 42 months, all right, 42 months. Remember, let me go back to this. Let me see if I can find it. I'm going way back to some things that we found. Okay. Remember that we talked about this number 1,260 days, right? If you work that through, that's going to lead you to approximately 3.5 years. Okay, so 1,260 days is going to end up about 3.5 years. That represents the time between the end times, basically, between Christ's death and his resurrection until his return. We are living in that time. So we're living in the 1,260 days. Obviously, this is not literal because there have been more than 1,260 days since the ascension of Christ. So it's figurative, but 3.5 years. Okay, so let's go forward and see another example. All right. Okay. Verse 5, notice where it says, and to exercise his authority, all right, for 42 months. All right, now let's work that through. How many months are in a year? 12. So 12, 1 year, 24, 2 years, 36, 3 years. And so if we have 42, 30 or 42 minus 36, what is that? 6 months. So again, where do we go? 42 months is 3.5 years. So in other words, just like 1,260, it's talking about a 3.5 year time period. Okay, so in other words, the devil has given the beast political and religious persecution, and it has this. All right. Now let's make sure that we have this all in perspective. The beast that is there and given power by the dragon, the devil, and the devil only has as much power as God allows him. So we have to recognize that this persecution is going on under the control of God. It's so important that we understand that whatever goes on the earth is either allowed by God or it is either caused by God. And so that's so important. Now, of course, there's all sorts of questions that come up for us. How does that work? How is it that God can allow these sorts of things? What are his purposes? Well, some of it, a couple of very brief answers. One is we recognize that human beings have a degree of free will, right? And that's a whole nother topic. But we do have a degree of free will. In other words, I can commit a crime. I can do evil of my own free will. So a lot of the suffering that we see in the world is a direct result of people making hurtful choices. Absolutely, you can see that. Other difficulties that go on is people hurting themselves, and when you see trouble in the world, when no one explicitly, clearly is at fault, we live in a broken world. So what we ultimately recognize is although God is in control and in many cases he even causes trouble, that doesn't mean that he is evil. It means that he is using the sinful world and the circumstances in it, and even using the devil here to bring about his good work. Let me give you the most profound example of that. Jesus Christ comes into the world. Why did he have to come into the world? To suffer and die on the cross. All right. So what happens with Jesus is with his suffering and death? He comes into the world, and the powers that be, the Jewish leaders, Rome, they put him to death. All right. Now at the time, of course, the devil's loving this because he gets to put the Son of God to death. But what's the ultimate result? Because of Christ's death, he has paid for sin. He has given us everlasting salvation. So that's a great example of how God uses what seems like a defeat and turns it into a victory. Another one is Job. Job goes through many, many hardships, and God gives the devil power to do this, freedom to do this. But ultimately, what is the good that comes out of it? God is glorified. God is glorified through it all. All right, so that's kind of where I'm going with this. Is kind of saying, how do we understand it, right? How do we understand that the devil can be there and give people power to persecute Christianity? Well, that's kind of where that's coming from. All right, maybe one or two more slides so we don't run out of time. Daniel 7. Then I kept looking because of the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body was restored and given to the burning fire. All right, so Daniel leading to this issue of destruction for the beast. Daniel 7:20. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which of three of them fell, namely the horn that had eyes and a mouth, uttering great boasts. All right, so don't want to get lost in the weeds on that, but just to show that in Daniel, this issue of heads and horns is used, the same kind of imagery, right? Okay. All right, now there's a whole lot of speculation, all right? There's a great deal of speculation regarding the identity of the heads and the horns of the beast. They may represent particular figures or perhaps groups or movements. All right, so again, we talked about horns and heads and horns on heads and so on and so forth. So, remembering that when we look at Revelation, what's going on, you have Caesar, you have local governors, you have leaders of false religions. So when we talk about the heads and the horns, it could be that those heads and horns refer to the particular leaders of the day, right? That these heads and horns are causing problems for the church, these particular people. In our modern day context, you might think like one of the heads is Joseph Stalin. Another one of the heads is Adolf Hitler. Another one of the heads is David Koresh. So leaders who have come and have either scandalized Christianity or have actively sought to destroy the church, those kinds of things. All right, so that's kind of what's going on here. We could spend a whole lot of time talking about the particular identities, but that's what's going on. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop here just so that we don't run out of time. Revelation. All inhabitants of the sea will worship the beast, all those names who have not been written in the book of life, belonging to the Lamb that was slain for the creation of the world. He who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed by the sword, with the sword he will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. Matthew 25. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you by the foundation of the world." All right, so here at the end, Jesus is giving very clear, very concrete information. It says all the inhabitants of the earth are going to worship the beast. In other words, you're going to have people all over the earth who will trust in false religions, who will put their faith in people, in governments, in intellectual movements. And this is going to happen. All the people whose names have not been written in the book of life, right? We hit on that with Daniel before. What is the book of life? If you're a Christian, your name is written in the book of life. If you're not a Christian, your name isn't written in the book of life. So these folks who are worshiping the beast, their names are not written in the book of life. All right. So verse 10 here is a clear, sobering prophecy for those who are Christians. If you're a Christian and you're going to go into captivity, you will. If you're a Christian and you're going to be put to death by the sword, you will. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. All right, and let me close with that here. I'll stop this share. The comforting message for us is coming from Matthew, where God says to those on his right, remembering he's separating the right and the left. That's not a political statement, but when he talks about folks on the right, he's saying that these are the folks who know Christ and who have been judged righteous for the sake of Christ. And so he's saying, come and sit in my kingdom. You are part of my family, so on and so forth. So again, a lot of images, but basically what's happening here in this passage is Jesus is talking about persecution, and it's coming, it's there, it happened. We've seen it all throughout history. We're dealing with it today, and we will continue to deal with it until Christ returns. But the comforting message is the victory of Jesus and the fact that through faith, your name is written in the book of life, and so is mine, because the Holy Spirit has come to me and he's come to you. So God's richest blessings to you. I pray this has been a benefit, and I always enjoy it, and I look forward to meeting with you again. Take care.